Hey, welcome to Historic Investments. Listen, I get asked all the time, I only want one Swiss military pistol. Which is my best choice? Please offer me a guide. So guys, what I'm going to do today, I'm going to offer you a guide. In the broadest possible terms, there are two types of P49s. The earliest ones, this is one example. It's got a high polished blue and it's got walnut serrated grips. About 10,000 were made. The rest were all matte finish guns like this example. So it's got more of a Parkerized finish and it's got black checkered grips. You want this one. So let's spend our time looking at the first variation P49. Okay, so here's a very nice example of an early production P49 pistol. So one of the first things you do, of course, after making sure that it's unloaded is to just pick up the gun, and what we'd like to do is to make sure that it's not reblued. Well, the Swiss do have a history of rebluing their guns. It's not quite like some of the British shotguns where they would reblue their guns after every season, but if you're not familiar with some of the SIG polishing and proofing techniques, and you're not really familiar with the hue of the blue, one of the first things you should look for is the proof. Now the proof, and if we can cone in just a little bit here on this proof, you should see that this was a mark that was struck after the gun was finished. You should see some cratered edges, and you should see a little bit of haloing around the gun. When the gun was refinished, whether it was done at, by a custom gunsmith or even at the SIG factory, this haloing is lost. So it's a good thing to look for. The next thing is let's just make sure that all of the serial numbers are matching. And that, if you're a collector, that's super important. And there are not as many serial numbers as you might expect to see for either a Luger or Brim Handler or Nambu. In this case, for these SIG P49s, there are only 4 numbers. So let's get a little bit closer and take a look at some of the serial numbers. 4 numbers, so let's just find them. You see the first full serial numbers on the slide right there. Okay, you see the serial number on the frame. Then let's flip the gun over and you need to see the serial number on the barrel. Unfortunately, some of these early guns have the serial number buried a little bit under the slide, so you will have to do a bit of disassembly. So let's go and do the disassembly. So at this point, I've taken out the magazine and I need to cock the hammer, retract the slide just a little bit, and push out the slide release. And be a little bit careful. You don't want to scratch up either the frame or the slide. And at this point, you can just slide the slide forward, which, as you may remember, one of the biggest advantages of these SIGs from an accuracy standpoint is that it has internal rails. So let's now concentrate on the slide. And to check the barrel serial number, we're going to have to push forward on the recoil spring and guide. Let's disassemble that. And unlike a Colt, we'll bring that forward a little bit more. And the barrel just comes out this way. And you'll just bring it out and check the serial number. Again, it's the full serial number without the A prefix. There we go. And you can see that the serial number is matching. So what is the 4th number? There's only 4 numbers on this gun. The 4th number is found on the housing of the hammer group. Now, sometimes these hammer groups can be pretty stuck. So what you do is you can just kind of wiggle it out. There you go. I'm kind of rocking the hammer and the ejector portion a little bit. I'm moving it up and it'll slip free just straight up off the frame. And then the number for the hammer group is in the housing just under the hammer. So if we can cone that in a little bit more, there you go. It's the last 4 digits of the serial number, which in this case is 1305. Reassembly is the same, just in reverse. So let's put in the hammer group here. Okay, that just slips in, and it's usually a little bit easier than dislodging it. And we will have to reassemble the slide. So we're going to put the barrel in. All right. Then we're going to put in the recoil spring and guide. Very easy. That just tensions in. The next thing is we're going to just slip it right here, again in front, knowing that it's got the internal rails. Let's take a look. There we go. And then what you want to make sure, if we'll cone it in a little bit more, is you want to just line up the hole so that the slide stop and the slide release will fit in nicely. You want to make sure that you put it in straight so that this piece does not scratch either the slide or the frame, and you're going to have to bring it back just a little bit for it to snap in. There you go. And because there's a magazine safety, you just can't drop the hammer. So let's put the magazine in. We will drop the hammer right now. And I'd like to talk about two more things. One are the characteristics of the correct magazine for this pistol. And then we're going to turn our attention to the specifics of the hammer group. Well, if you've got a high-polished pistol, you need a high-polished magazine. And of course, as you might expect, magazines get used, and lots of times the magazines get reblued. So what do you need to look for to make sure that you've got an original blued magazine? Well, look for the polish lines, and it's not really a temper line at all. It's an area of cross polishing. So if you've got an original magazine, this is really pretty easy to look for. You know, you just move it around just the right way in the light. You'll see polishing lines that extend parallel to the body of the magazine for about the first 80–85%. And you can actually see kind of the medium grit lines right there. And then going up from about 3/4 of an inch from the floor plate, it's cross polished. So you can see, here it is, the right side. We'll turn it over. Here's the left side of the magazine, and it's very easy to see that. When the magazines are reblued, usually when people reblue them, you'll have a uniform kind of polish lines, and they'll all be in one direction. You kind of lose the cross polishing here, or sometimes you lose all the polishing entirely, and it's just a uniform blue. The one exception I wanted to make a point of is the very, very earliest high polish blue, and these are the high polish blue P49s. They were actually issued with magazines whose walls were in the white, and they tended to rust, and the Swiss military didn't like them, and they recalled those magazines, and they were replaced with blued magazines. So if you have a chance to buy a very early gun and you find that the magazine body is in the white, don't be distressed. That's actually correct. What people have done is lots of times they'll take blued magazines, strip the blue, and try to pass them off as magazines that were originally made in the white. But there are a couple of little clues you can use. These are polished areas, so if you look very, very carefully, the magazines that were originally made in the white, the surfaces here are perfectly flat around the hole. If you strip off the bluing, you're going to see a little bit of dishing around the holes. The other thing is you can see how the magazine bodies are polished again with a parallel and then the perpendicular marks. The bodies that were in the white were never polished. They were just bent sheet metal, so you don't see any polishing lines. So there's a little clue for you. The last thing I want to mention is some details about the hammer group. Now, we're all kind of familiar with guns that traditionally have a half cock with the hammer. So you'd pull it back and you'd hear a click. Well, here, this one doesn't have a click. And why is that? Because the high polished guns were originally made with a hammer group that did not have a half cock. So you pull it back, you don't hear anything. You pull it back a little bit more, nothing happens. You pull it back more, and finally, click. Now it's engaged. Well, the problem is that during the cocking, there were a number of inadvertent discharges. The Swiss military didn't like it, so there was a recall on the original hammers. And what happened is the guns were recalled, and the hammer groups were replaced with updated assemblies having a half cock. So just like a number of more modern guns, you'd bring it back about this far, you'd hear a little click, the hammer would stay in place, that's the half cock, and then you'd bring it back all the way. Well, here, just to show you the difference, let me bring into focus a later production gun. So this is a later matte finish P49, and let me show you the difference. There, did you hear that? That's the half cock. Bring it back, now it's fully cocked. I'll release the hammer and show you one more time. Click. There you go. Click. Full cock. So if you're a collector, this is actually a very important point. First, you've made sure that all the serial numbers match. We talked about it for serial numbers. But you also ideally would like to have a gun with the original hammer group. So by all means, check out the hammer and see if there's a half cock or it only has a full cock. Finally, if you're a serious collector, you want to make sure you've got the correct holster. So the holster, of course, should look like this, and this is a very typical Swiss military holster. It's got a tie-down strap that's secured with a single stud. It's got an external magazine pouch, and again, it's a high-polished gun. You need 2 high-polished, unmarked, otherwise unmarked magazines. You will see some holsters that will occasionally have a second stud here. Those were added later. That's kind of a battle-ready stud to, to secure the lid in place. It was not issued that way for the earliest guns. You want something like this. And you want a holster that's correctly dated. So you want something that's in the early 50s. So if you turn the holster around, all of the military, not the commercial, but the military holsters are all manufacturer marked and dated. So you want a holster with the early 1950s to correspond to your gun. And there are a number of different shoulder straps. They were all issued with shoulder straps. Not all of the shoulder straps were numbered, but most, or I should say dated, not numbered, but most of the early straps were dated, and ideally the strap should have the same year date as the holster and, of course, production year of the pistol. Well, thanks again for joining us on Historic Investments. Hopefully you learned a little bit more about some Swiss military pistols, and hopefully you learned enough to pick out your own first variation gun, and hopefully it'll also be a great investment for you. Good luck and good collecting.